Located in northern Alameda County, AFSCME Local 444 represents blue-collar workers at the local water district, East Bay Mud. In the late 1980s, Local 444 was arguably the most left-wing union local in the entire country. And in 1989, they hosted a meeting for Anthony Mazzocchi, National Secretary-Treasurer of the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers, to speak on the question of a labor party. Today, when there is still some discussion about trying to reform the Democrats, that meeting is of great historical significance. Mazzocchi himself said that it was that meeting and a similar follow-up meeting in New York City that led him to call for the formation of what he initially called the Labor Party Advocates, later to be called the Labor Party. Here, we present sections of a video of that meeting. This is the first section. Marvin Kane, president of the local, calls the meeting to order.
I'm president of AFSCME Local 444, which is the sponsor of this meeting. And also we have a special guest, Brother Tony Mazzocchi, International Secretary-Treasurer of the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers.
The great
Richard Mellor, who in many ways was the driving force behind organizing this meeting, introduces Tony Mazzocchi.
The officers of my union and its members and all the unions in AFSCME and other trade unions that have helped to publicize and to sponsor this meeting. I just want to explain for those, perhaps some of the younger workers, that in America, the working people do not have a political party of our own. In all the other countries in the industrialized world, working people have their own parties which are based or rooted in the trade unions.
Mellor raises the issue of the then ongoing savings and loans scandal and the role of Charles Keating.
Lincoln Thrift raised $1.4 million for 5 senators. When asked if the money raised brought him influence, he said, and I quote, the honest man that he is, "I want to say in the most forceful way I can, I certainly hope so." As the flyers for this meeting state, the USA is the only advanced capitalist country where working people have no political party of their own, rooted in the trade unions. Yet the question of independent political action is constantly raised if we look back at our great history. All the great struggles of the past, when US workers took to the offensive, are accompanied by movements for independent political action. In the great struggles for better conditions, particularly the 8-hour day movement of 1884 to 1886, labor parties were formed in response to brutal attacks by the employers, their courts, and their political parties. So from these attempts to the movement around Eugene Debs, who ran for president on the Socialist Party ticket in 1912 and 1920, receiving 1 million votes each time. He ran in the second time from his prison cell. To the tremendous support for a Labour Party in the 1930s and 40s. This tendency toward independent political action is present in US history. The 3 great strikes in 1934, the great general strikes of Minneapolis, San Francisco, and Toledo, were followed by the sit-down movement of 1936 and 1937. And at its height, 500,000 American workers occupied over 1,000 workplaces. By the mid-1940s, union membership had increased 5-fold in the 15-year period from the 1930, the onset of the Depression. And of course, those of us that are aware, the UAW and the CIO became a reality. And we mustn't forget that General Motors, which owned countries at the time, said to the American workers, "You will never have a union." Well, they got a union, and it wasn't given to them. So we can imagine what that period was like. In 1937, opinion polls showed 21% of the population favored the formation of a Labour Party. And in 1940, John L. Lewis, one of the founders of the CIO and the leader of the United Mine Workers, one of the United Mine Workers leaders, came out against President Roosevelt politically. And a few days later, after taking this position, was to have a radio broadcast, gave a radio broadcast. And it's estimated that 25 to 30 million listeners tuned in to hear what they hoped would be a call for a Labour Party. But in a disastrous decision, which affects the life of every US worker today, Lewis supported the Republicans, Wendell Willkie. Were that mistake not made, American workers today, US workers, would most likely have their own political party and also, just as an example, a National Health Service. That decision blocked the development, helped to block the development of an independent political party in America. And it wasn't only the trade union leaders and Lewis, but also the Communist Party at that time, which I think had some 100,000 members, also supported Roosevelt and blocked the development of independent political action on behalf of American workers. And I've been active in the labour movement around here for 12, 15 years, and I visit many picket lines, and I talk to workers in my workplace and on picket lines, and many people say that it's not the time for a Labour Party. However, I don't think I recall anybody, whether a Labour leader or a rank-and-file union member, that opposes a Labour Party. They say it's not the time, particularly the Labour leadership will often say it's not the time. But if we look at the last 15 years, US workers' real wages have fallen 15%. In 1973, it took 20% of a median family income to carry a home mortgage. In 1986, it took 51%. Only a third of our unemployed receive any benefits at all. And some 40 million people, some people say as high as 80 million if you include, I've read some figures that say 80 million. But certainly some 40 million people in the United States have no health insurance. And perhaps one of the most crushing indictments of our political system is that between 1986 and 1988, the life expectancy of black Americans actually decreased. This is not in the Congo, this is in the United States of America, that the life expectancy of a whole section of our population goes down in the most powerful country that's ever existed on the planet. So I believe that this meeting is important in light of the present economic situation. American workers are taking these cuts, we mustn't forget, brothers and sisters, in a boom. This is the longest boom in peacetime history. We're taking cuts in a boom, in an economic upswing. An upswing, incidentally, based purely on speculation and credit. In the last 10 weeks, I saw a report, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal just yesterday, or the day, just in the last few days, 100,000 workers have been laid off in the last 10 weeks. So before I introduce the guest speaker, we have two international statements, letters of support for this meeting. One of them is from the Southern African Labour Education Project. These are brothers and sisters inside and outside South Africa. Local 444 has helped them, written to them, invited them here. They work inside and outside South Africa for to build the trade unions and to the end to apartheid. And I'd like to read that to you. Message to the conference on the formation of a Labour Party, 12th of December 1989. The Southern African Labour Education Project, SALEP, sends fraternal greetings to your conference discussing the establishment of a Labour Party in the USA. We are inspired by this bold initiative as the independent voice of the American working class means another step forward for the working class worldwide. We are pleased this conference is sponsored by AFSCME Local 444, which is a proud record of supporting workers in struggle throughout the world. The campaign around the release of Palestinian trade unionist Mahmoud Masara, the marvelous fighting campaign around the release of Moses Mayakiso, the South African trade union leader, shows the true meaning of workers' internationalism. Like you have stood beside us, we stand with you in your fight against exploitation by the bosses. Go forward and build a Labour Party. Workers of all countries unite. From the Southern African Labour Education Project. We have one other statement from the British Parliament, signed by 10 Labour Party MPs. It says, "Dear brothers and sisters, we have heard about your meeting on Tuesday the 12th of December to lay the basis for the formation of a great party, for a party of labour in the United States of America. We wish to send our warm fraternal greetings to this very important meeting of trade unionists. The formation of a US Party of Labour would be a huge step forward for workers in your country and for the labour movement throughout the whole world. We wish you every success and look forward to uniting together in the fight to end the brutal rule of the bosses once and for all. Yours in solidarity," and it's signed by 10 British Labour Party MPs. So with that, brothers and sisters, I'd like to introduce the next speaker, and he's a trade unionist who has been in the trade union movement. I've had an opportunity to spend the last couple of days taking him around and being with him. He spent 43 years of his life in the trade union movement. I believe originating in the CIO, predominantly in industrial unions. So he's had many, many years' experience. And I think I'd like to thank him for coming. I'd like to introduce Brother Anthony Mazzocchi. He's the International Secretary-Treasurer of the Oil, Chemical and Atomic Workers Union, where he will tonight express his views on the question of a Labour Party in the United States. Thank you very much, everyone.
In the next section, we will present portions of Anthony Mazzacchi's speech. The reason we are presenting it this way, by the way, is that the entire video is close to 2 hours long, and most people won't watch something like that on the internet.